Great, thank you. Well, we all can't thank you all enough for being here and being so engaged over the past day and a half. It was just fantastic, all of this discussion that has occurred. So on behalf of the Planning Committee, we just want to thank you all. It's been great. And we wanted to thank the National Academy of Science for having this workshop and for bringing such great speakers here. I will keep the closing remarks brief. I know everybody's tired and ready for lunch. But I just wanted to take a minute and think back to our objectives for our workshop. And I was actually struck when I did that I felt like we did a pretty good job with our objectives. We really brought together some really good viewpoints and stakeholders from different areas to really talk about this issue and the issue that we're having, as well as what those big data gaps are as we start to think about the human health exposure and the human health effects and how we should really be thinking about this area. And so I thought, yesterday, fantastic talks on identifying, measuring microplastics, the issues that we're seeing, and understanding the effects of what we're seeing in foods. What do we know about effects right now? Where do we need to go? Just really good discussion there. And today we talked about reducing microplastics in the environment and the policy, which is huge, and how we're going to get there. So it's really been exciting. I just wanted to, thanks to Kara for the slide, but reflect back to where we started, which is that, we are measuring these. There's tons of studies going on measuring these materials. They're out there, they're abundant. They have a lot of different chemical compositions, but how we measure them, and that came up repeatedly, how we measure them, how we define them, making sure we get down to nano, right, has come up repeatedly. So let's make sure of what we're measuring as we're doing all of these programs. We need to come up with standardized methods. That's come up repeatedly. And we're finding it. So we care about it because we're finding it now in things that humans will be exposed to. So as we think about that, then we need to really start to answer some of these questions. So as we got into our first session, I think I just wanted to pull out some of the key areas I saw that came out of that session. The discussion about the accuracy of the methods, the right QA/QC approaches, the standardizing of the methods, and all of the work that will go behind doing that is a really important discussion in making sure we're comparing apples to apples. As well as understanding this idea that I thought was really great that came up was this idea of the bioavailable fraction. And what is mattering to different organisms is an area that I think we're all kind of interested after these talks of really exploring and understanding more. The polymer identification, so we know there's different sizes, and it may be the size that matters, but it also may be that identification, and really being able to do that for these studies where we need to know that. But then we also had some discussion where there might be an opportunity, in some cases maybe we don't need to know that level, and there might be some interesting screening approaches that we could turn to. And so kind of knowing where to apply which technologies to move the science forward, I think, is going to be a trick as we try to advance quickly, as we've heard some of those discussions here today. So I think it's important that we still think about this harmonizing approaches and working together across to making sure that we are having harmonized collection of data, harmonizing results so that we can use studies and compare results across studies, which just came up multiple times, of the inability to understand the results from some studies and compare them with other studies because of what was being reported. And so really trying to get that narrowed down, making sure that we are reporting what we need so that we can compare across studies is really important. And then, of course, it came up many times, that realistic exposure concentration and evaluating that, but also the environmental relevance of the studies as well came up. So really thinking about that as we're conducting these studies before at the design stage, right? Making sure we're thinking that in the design stage of the studies. So, and then we went to our second session where we had some pretty interesting discussions come out. We heard about seafood and the misconception that that was going to be the primary source of human exposure, and maybe that really wasn't. And maybe we really needed to be focusing on air, which we haven't done a whole lot of in air monitoring work, to really understand if we're going to try to do a human health risk assessment, as we tried to do yesterday, what are the endpoints we need to bring together. And so it was interesting, there was some discussion about the point that so far that microplastics have not been found to biomagnify in aquatic food webs. What does that mean then for the human exposure? And then also, what does it mean from the environmental side and the organisms that are at the bottom of the food web, and kind of watching both sides of that. The nano, right? So we heard from Alan the importance of focusing on 100 microns or lower. It was interesting, he also brought up the tire wear and the anti-fouling paint, and are we needing to look at some other materials that we haven't been looking at before because of some of the toxicity that they carry with them as well. And also the idea, is there a way that TSS becomes a potential surrogate for microplastics? So as we're looking at different alternatives to move things faster, what surrogates can we use for understanding effects? And then lots of discussion, and that was great, about this existing knowledge in the space of nanomaterials, nanotoxicity, the nanopharma work. How can we best leverage that as we make decisions on what are the right effects assessments moving forward? The discussions on the mixtures and what we learned from trying to do mixtures work, which is obviously always complicated, and everyone knows, oh, mixtures. But what can we leverage there, right? And how can we best use that knowledge here as we're trying to move forward? And then I think one of the big things that came out yesterday, as Mark told us all, the need for a national strategy for funding research, and Mark repeated that in his comments yesterday, and I thought that was a great catch. So today we heard a lot of interesting talks about reducing plastics in the environment. You know, Rebecca talked about the importance of us to holistically consider local infrastructures, sourcing of materials, as well as options for recovery, so that we weren't going to replace and have a trade-off that we were unhappy with when we made one decision versus another. And that holistic thinking, I think, came up repeatedly today. Obviously, I spoke on biodegradation. I think there is a point where it can be beneficial, and I think there's points where we're going to be looking for alternative materials and alternative ways to deal with that problem. It's a huge problem. I don't think it's going to be a one-size-fits-all answer for all of these different types of materials we're talking about and all of these different end-of-lives that we're talking about. So we heard a really interesting presentation on the wastewater treatment and how detailed analysis we could get into in looking at wastewater treatment, and how well the wastewater treatment processes that we have in developed countries could effectively remove the different microplastic materials, and how we can study that. And it was interesting, it was very effective in removing from effluents, but we do need further work on understanding the biosolids levels and what happens as we're land applying those materials. And then obviously the chemical upcycling, I think, has everybody excited about those ideas. And is there a way that we can get a beneficial use out of these materials, whether it's the backlog of materials or the concern for the plastics that will come, right? And is there a way to change either how we're designing the materials, or to figure out how to work within what we have for this upcycling approach to be able to get some reuse value out of these materials different than we do today? And I did try to capture a few points from what just discussed on the end, but I was under the gun to give them my presentation, so apologize if I missed the end part. But I thought there was some pretty good discussion, again, on this need for standardized methods, right? And we've heard that a lot here today, standardized methods and approaches that are going to be really important for us to be able to define policy against. The need to gather more information on human exposure and effects in order to better inform this policy. And some of our panelists really feeling we're not there yet. We need to gather more information. And I think that's been something we've heard throughout the past day and a half. And there's a lot of areas where we really have big data gaps that we need to fill. And we maybe need to start focusing this thinking on retaining value of the plastics, and how can we start changing our thinking moving forward with the end in mind. How can we start to think about regaining value? And the need to raise awareness, which I thought was interesting, that came out of the discussions this morning, and do really a better job educating the public, but also educating on what matters and what doesn't matter, because we see that that's not always being, from the scientific side, not being communicated correctly. So thank you all for coming. It's been great. And I don't know, oh, wait, I forgot I had one more, sorry. I borrowed this from Mark because I thought it was great. Thanks, Mark. about this potential for collaborations, because I do think that came out huge over the past few days. The really importance of needing to collaborate across the different expert areas, whether it's the environmental scientists, the human health experts, the polymer chemists, the behavioral scientists came up today, the policy experts, right? So if we're not all talking in this space, we may come up with regrettable substitutions or a bad choice in how we move forward. And so I think it is going to be really important to continue cross-fertilizing and having these discussions. We also heard about really some options for harmonizing definitions and reporting criteria and working together on those collaborations. As well as, again, we keep hearing the performance standards, the standard materials, the reference materials, how do we work together and harmonize those issues as well? As well as talk interlaboratory comparisons seem to be a very big need where we can come together and collaborate, as well as the other public and private partnership examples that we heard about. So with that now, I will let you all have your lunch. Thank you again for coming. It was really great discussion. We really appreciate it.